Stats Report Week 2. Welcome to Talkin' Giants. My name is Justin Penik, and we are 0-2. And it's a shame because a lot of the things that we talked about last week on the offensive side of the ball, the Giants corrected. They threw the ball on first down. They were aggressive on early downs. They put the game in Daniel Jones' hands. They put the game in Daniel Jones' legs. And Daniel Jones' legs is like his path to becoming an above average or average quarterback in this National Football League. The Giants offense, I said at the conclusion of last week and during the Stats Report video, I said that they were moving the ball well. Their defense just didn't give them a lot of opportunities to put points on the board. And I said if they got more opportunities to put points on the board that I thought they were going to. Well, lo and behold, week 2, 29 points the Giants put up. The only problem is that they allowed 30. 29 points is the most of this Jason Garrett play calling era that has been a year and 2 games. So it's a shame that we should be celebrating that despite Kenny Golladay basically being non-existent in a way, Saquon Barkley basically being non-existent except for a 40-yard run. He's not being used in the receiving game at all. That despite all that Daniel Jones has taken such big strides in the first 2 games of the season, despite one fumble against Denver. But this past Thursday, we should be celebrating Daniel Jones and the strides that he's taken, and that this offense was somewhat explosive. I mean, it was explosive this past week. We should be celebrating it, but we can't. We cannot. We'll talk about the defense, and I know a lot of people, they want to hear what's going wrong with the defense, what's going wrong with the defense. We'll talk about it. I have a working theory. I actually have some coverage stats this week. I didn't have those coverage stats, but thanks to Dan Duggan and his article in The Athletic, we actually have some coverage stats of what coverages the Giants are running, so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the stats report. So let's actually get to it, and let's start off with the offensive side of the ball like we always do with the explosive play report. And I'm starting off with the explosive play report right after the introduction because this offense, they operated like a regular, normal offense does. And that's a very, very good sign. So, 5 total plays of 20-plus yards. 2 runs, 3 passes. On a normal basis, if I want to push more out of this offense, I want to see 1 or 2 more plays of 20-plus yards to make it 4 or 5 per game. If we can average 4 or 5 20-plus yard passing plays every single game, I am loving what we are doing, and I feel like we're in a good spot. There should be games where maybe we should get more than what we should average, but we should be averaging 4 or 5. That shouldn't be the cap if we want to really get this offense to a place where it can be good. And I know that's a lot to ask out of Jason Garrett. I know it's a lot to ask out of this offensive line, but it's week 2, and we're continuing to grow. Let's reach for more, especially considering that Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney, they've been basically irrelevant to start this year. Kenny Golladay has made some nice plays, and we'll talk about it. But Giants also had 4 runs of 10-plus yards, which is really helpful. Daniel Jones' legs. 6 passing plays of 15-plus yards, and the Giants finally take advantage of single high safety looks. That's one of my big notes, and we'll talk about some of the explosive plays individually right now. Every single explosive play was out of the shotgun, and the 2 that were under center also included play action. I love to see that. Love to see it. When you're under center, and when you're in a rushing formation, utilizing play action and fooling the defenders, even if it's for a half a second, that is so key, helped produce an explosive play. Love it. And Daniel Jones is just a much better passer out of the shotgun, and Saquon Barkley is a much better runner out of the shotgun. So just use shotgun, and that's what the Giants did a ton. They just said they didn't scrap under center, but their most effective plays were out of the shotgun, and the majority of their plays were out of shotgun. I love to see that. Play to your players' strengths. Don't just go to what you want to do. Saquon Barkley's 40-yard run was out of the shotgun. Most plays were out of the shotgun, including Daniel Jones' best passes. So using Kenny Golladay off of play action and RPO has been effective so far, and also one of the only ways that he's been used. That little route in the middle of the field, the in route, out route, going towards the middle of the field. That's how he's been used. Those were the 2 plays that he had 15-plus yards last week against Denver. And then also you see it here as well, except this week it was off of like an RPO. I mean, I'm fine with that. Kenny Golladay and Darius Slayton. Kenny Golladay and Daniel Jones, their chemistry is hopefully going to build as time goes on because Kenny Golladay is not a guy that gets separation. So even when Kenny Golladay is covered, he can still be open at times because he is a contested catch king, and that's what he's known for. So Daniel Jones may not feel totally comfortable throwing the ball when he's pseudo-covered, even when he's not covered because he can go up and he can make a play with the football. So I trust that Kenny Golladay is going to be more involved in this offense. I know it's scary season right now because it's like, dude, this dude hasn't been involved a lot. but he wasn't participating in training camp a lot, and the ways that he has been involved, he's helped the Giants. Obviously, he had some drops too, but I trust that he's going to be involved more. Saquon Barkley's big run, plus some of Daniel Jones's big runs, was with Caden Smith being used as like that lead blocker. And that has been the play that has really changed and made this Giants rushing offense somewhat relevant. And frankly, it's really the only thing that is working. I mean, besides Daniel Jones taking a read option where he's looking at that edge defender, and if that edge defender is kind of going after Barkley, if he's staying in the box and he's accounting for Daniel Jones, besides that play where Jones keeps it, and then boom, that's a big explosive play there, what else is working in the run game? And Saquon Barkley did have a better game, especially when we'll talk about some of the next-gen metrics after the explosive play report. But he had a better game. But really, the only thing that seems to be working consistently in terms of the rushing offense is when Caden Smith is being used as a lead blocker. We need something else to work, and that was Saquon Barkley's big play. Also, some of the big plays, like Sterling Shepard's 19-yard gain, you see where the presence of Kenny Galladay is felt, where there's a single high safety, and they're ultimately shadowing towards his side. So that is going to be opening up guys like Sterling Shepard, like Darius Slayton, to make some plays. And a 19-yard gain is where you had a single high safety that was shadowing over towards Kenny Galladay's side. It opened up Sterling Shepard. The Darius Slayton 33-yard touchdown was taking advantage of a single high look. Darius Slayton's one-on-one on the outside, runs a good route off the line of scrimmage. Daniel Jones puts a good ball on. Boom, it allows your skill position players to go up and make a play. I love to see that. And the Giants last year, they faced a ton of cover one, where that single high safety, and basically you have everybody else that's playing man coverage all at the line of scrimmage and all playing press. I mean, that's basically what cover one is. And the Giants last year, they faced that a ton because defenses didn't respect the Giants' ability to throw the ball deep down the field on a consistent rate. If they can start to do it like they did against Washington, plus some more, then that might change. You're going to be working with more two high safety stuff, and then some of the underneath stuff will open up. The running game will open up when there's less guys in the box, and that's ultimately the hope and the goal. The Caden Smith crossing route needs to happen more, and this even includes when Evan Ingram comes back as well. That kind of crossing route stuff, using your tight ends down the field, needs to happen more. Not just a Y option, curl route, whatever in the middle of the field. Use your tight ends down the field as receiving threats. Caden Smith deserves more reps, and certainly that is Evan Ingram's bread and butter, running that kind of straight line when he ultimately comes back and when he's healthy, which may very well be this Sunday. So that's the explosive play report. Let's get to talking about Daniel Jones and comparing him to some of the quarterbacks in the National Football League. I know the whole talking point of, Daniel Jones' passing grade is second best in the National Football League, blah, 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 PFF grade. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't really talk about PFF grades. So let's talk about EPA. Through the first 2 weeks of the season, Daniel Jones is 8th in the NFL in total EPA, right in front of Lamar Jackson. He was the second best quarterback in the National Football League this weekend in total EPA, right behind Derek Carr, who had a really insane game. He was second best in rushing EPA for QBs behind Lamar Jackson, and was 13th in passing EPA, which further backs my point that if Daniel Jones is going to be an above-average quarterback in the National Football League, it is not going to be solely because of his arm, especially in a Jason Garrett system. Maybe in a Pat Shurmur system, Daniel Jones' arm is leading him to be an above-average quarterback, but it's not in this Jason Garrett system. His legs are going to be the reason why he is going to provide the most value as possible to this Giants offense, and he showed it with 9 carries, 95 yards, rushing touchdown that should have been 2 rushing touchdowns if it wasn't for certainly a debatable holding call on CJ Board. And also, think of how good the Giants offense looked on Thursday, considering they only had an average of 1.9 yards after the catch per completion. That's brutal. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's even worse than it was last week. And last week it was because of Sterling Shepard's great individual effort on, that 30, 40-yard touchdown that he had against the Broncos. So 1.9 yards after the catch per completion. Daniel Jones had 249 yards. Do the math. It's pretty putrid. And he was really, really good. The fact that there was such little help for him after the catch from his skill position players and the scheme, the fact that there's such little help for him after the catch, there's no free yards that are given to Daniel Jones. He earns every single one of them with good ball placement and decision-making as well. So good for Daniel Jones. I'm showing it on the screen right now. I may have shown it a little bit earlier, but I'm showing it again because I don't care. This Giants offense is an above-average offense when you look at the team from an EPA standpoint. They are an above-average offense after 2 weeks. Obviously, a very different story when it comes to the defense. Let's talk about 2 more players. Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard has been really, really good. I mean, he's been the one guy that has really made this offense and this passing offense, I would say this offense in general outside of Daniel Jones, made this offense churn and move the sticks and able to operate. 84% catch rate. Insane. I mean, he had a 73% catch rate overall last year, but it was 79.8% with Daniel Jones in the games that Daniel Jones did start last year. And the fact that he's off to this start, I'm pretty sure, I hate to do this, on a 17-game rate after 2 games, Sterling Shepard's on pace for 136 catches. It's bananas. I don't like saying that, but Bobby Skinner's the type of guy that would say that, so I'm sure he's happy hearing that. 84% catch rate, and you're seeing the graphic that I have on the screen right now, that his catch rate over expected, he's top 3 in the National Football League. He's making things happen. He's getting yards after the catch when he can. He's the most reliable target, and he's the most important target for Daniel Jones this year, and I don't think that's going to change unless Kenny Golladay can really start to produce some more explosive plays. And that's not even a referendum on Kenny Golladay, it's a referendum on how good Sterling Shepard is. So that's Sterling Shepard. So let's talk about Saquon Barkley, too. I was really critical of him last week. I still am pretty critical of him, but he did have a better game. And especially when you look at the next-gen stats and the next-gen metrics that we do, he was a lot more efficient. His rushing yards over expected per attempt, it was above 1, and it was above average. It was in the top quarter of the National Football League out of all running backs, not counting Monday Night Football. So Saquon Barkley did have a better game. It was just that on 12 carries, that went for 16 yards, not counting the 1 carry that went for 44 yards. On those 12 carries, he had nowhere to go. And he didn't have a lot of negative plays. It was just nothing great besides the 1 carry that went for 44 yards. So I can't discredit that. It was a good run. But I like those metrics. I like the next-gen metrics that tries to measure individual effort on running backs. And they said that, hey, Saquon did not have a bad game, that he actually kind of helped his team for what the circumstances were surrounding him, which the rushing offense and the run blocking has not been great to start the year. So that's a good sign from Saquon. He got the explosive play, kind of got the monkey off his back, still doesn't have that touchdown. I want him to get a rushing touchdown. I want him to have that moment where he's like, yes, I helped my team score a touchdown. And certainly on that 44-yard play, he certainly helped put them in the red zone and put them on the other side of the 50-yard line. So good for Saquon. All right, let's go to the defense side of the ball now and start off with the explosive play report. On that side of the ball, the Giants defense, they allowed 3 plays of 20-plus yards, all passes, 6 plays of 15-plus yards, also all passes, and 2 runs of 10-plus yards. I'm not concerned about the Giants' run defense. I'm not. They're not allowing explosive running plays, and still they're not allowing, consistent gains. That's making me concerned that teams are just going to run at will. I am more concerned about the Giants' passing defense because the way that they're playing their pass defense, it's just inviting teams to throw over and over and over again, and it's simply pitch and catch, pitch and catch, pitch and catch. So this is per Dan Duggan. I don't necessarily know how Dan Duggan got access to this, but I'm very glad that he got access to the coverage rates, because that has been the main question so far this season, through 2 weeks of the season, short weeks, but that was my main question last week, and I couldn't get hands on the data. So I just presumed that because Patrick ran such a high blitz rate that they were playing man coverage. Well, I was very wrong, and this is per Dan Duggan. The Giants defense so far, they've played cover 3 on 32% of opponent dropbacks, cover 2 on 20% of opponent dropbacks. There's been an uptick in cover 1 usage, which we talked about with the offense, where you're kind of playing man coverage around the board with the single high safety. Cover 1 usage, 20% this season versus 12% last season. But cover 2 man usage, which is different than regular cover 2. Cover 2 man is where basically you have 2 deep safeties where they're sharing their halves of the field, and then you're playing man coverage on the bottom end with your slot corners and your boundary corners. So cover 2 man usage has dipped from 8% to 3% this season. So they've remained a zone-heavy defense, which is not something that I would have thought. Look, like I said, based off of the blitz rate last week, and also, it was late. I didn't have access to the old 22 by the stats report last week. So it's kind of disheartening that the Giants defense is getting beat relatively by the same things that they were doing last year. You know, I know some film buffs will tell you that Patrick Graham is doing some things different pre-snap to post-snap, but I'm not smart enough to overall do that. But what I am smart enough is to look at the cushion that's between the wide receiver and the cornerback on this Giants defense. And I can see that cushion, especially when you consider it was Terry McLaurin and James Bradbury, that cushion is very apparent. I want more man coverage. I mean, this is why we signed Adoree Jackson. This is why we gave James Bradbury a compliment at the outside boundary spot opposite of him. So this defense can play some more man coverage because they are getting beat by like this soft zone, which I really hate that phrase because that's what worked last year. But I kind of want Patrick Graham to mix it up a little bit more. You know, if this is how the Giants are getting beat, then I want you to mix it up a little bit more. I know I said last week, go back to your roots and go back to what worked, but clearly, now that we actually have the data of the cover usage, they're getting beat by relatively what they were doing last year. And something significant to really note on how Taylor Heinicke beat this Giants defense, he got rid of the ball in 2.44 seconds. That was the second quickest time to throw from the weekend out of all quarterbacks. So yes, I think the pass rush, a lot of people like to talk about the pass rush deserving a lot of criticism right now. Yes, the pass rush does deserve criticism. Nobody can win. Nobody can win. Nobody has a move. I mean, Ojulari has had 3 pressures this past week. Ojulari had a sack. It still took him almost 5 seconds to get back there. Leonard Williams should have had a sack. He didn't have a pressure or QB hit, nothing this past weekend, and he did miss a sack, and I'm showing it on the screen right now. So the pass rushers do deserve criticism. They do. But when the quarterback is getting rid of the ball in 2.44 seconds, unlike the previous week where Teddy Bridgewater held onto it for 3 seconds, I can't really critique the pass rush when Taylor Heinicke is getting the ball and in less than 2.5 seconds, he's getting the ball out of his hands. I can't criticize the pass rush. I can criticize the secondary and I can't criticize the scheme in terms of how they're calling things. Taylor Heinicke's average yards to the 6 per pass attempt was -2 yards. That's pretty conservative. That's pretty relatively conservative. So you can ask, well, so why did the Giants defense allow so many yards? If Taylor Heinicke wasn't throwing a ball down the field and he wasn't slinging it, obviously not counting the 56-yard play to J.D. McKissick where Tay Crowder got beat on the sideline, and obviously the 19-yard touchdown, or maybe even been more than 19 yards, the following play after that McKissick. So if Heinicke wasn't throwing the ball down the field, how was the Giants defense getting beat? So let's pull up the next-gen spray chart, and I'm going to talk to you about yards after the catch. So, week 1. 87 total yards after the catch for the Broncos in week 1. Okay, remember that number 87. 144 total yards after the catch in week 2 for Washington. That's a lot. And I'll tell you about how much that actually is. Last year, let's compare it. Last year, the Giants defense averaged giving up 51.56 yards after the catch per game. And that was about middle of the pack, probably a little bit below average. So that's good. 51.56 yards after the catch per game the Giants defense allowed. The Texans defense, so let's compare that 144 yards total yards after the catch for week 2 against Washington. Let's compare that total. The Texans were number 1 last year in most total yards after the catch. They averaged 142 yards after the catch per game allowed. So, by the standards of 2020, the Giants defense allowed the most yards after the catch that you kind of can as an NFL team when you compare it to 2020. It was not good. And that is where the Giants got beat. They're playing their safeties so far down the field. And this is where a lot of the film buffs, I think they'll agree with me. And this is where the eye test tries to meet the analytics and the film and whatever. This is what I try to do. The Giants safeties are playing so far down the field that when you allowed the catch for the underneath stuff, they're not coming up and they're not swarming to the ball like they were last year. So yes, the Giants were playing cover 3 last year. The Giants are playing cover 3 and cover 2 this year. But what's the difference? It's the yards after the catch. And even 87, that was 30, that was some 30 yards more yards after the catch that they allowed on average more than last year. So even week 1, that was a problem and that was apparent. But against Washington, I mean, it was just yards after the catch, yards after the catch. It turns, and here's what happens. It turns a 3rd and long that you get, maybe it's a 3rd and 14, you get 10 yards on it, it turns into a 4th and 4, and maybe an offense feels confident that they can go for it on 4th down because this Giants defense can't stop a nosebleed. So that's like what's been happening so far, and that yards after the catch stat is probably most damning for me, because when you see the corners, how far off they're playing, how much cushion the Giants cornerbacks are giving those Washington wide receivers, it's only going to leave the intermediate part of the field open, and it's only going to lead to yards after the catch. And that was the problem that we saw kind of towards the latter part of last year, like against Arizona. I think we saw it against Baltimore, where a lot of catches underneath and then yards after the catch was allowed. Those were problems that we saw during those games, and now they are on steroids. So, how do you fix it? I think how you fix it is you play more man coverage. Tighter coverage. Let your corners that you're paying a lot of money to, let them go to work. And if you need to shadow help to somebody, shadow it to Darnay Holmes. He did not have a great game this past Thursday. Granted, James Bradbury didn't either. But you look at the catches that James Bradbury did allow. If he's not playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage and Terry McLaurin's running really good routes and catching balls in the middle of the field, then maybe he doesn't allow 8 catches on 10 targets. You know, we're almost at a point with this Giants defense where if my corners that I'm paying a lot of money to are going to get beat by a deep contested catch by a talented wide receiver like Terry McLaurin, or, you know, next week against the Falcons, if it's going to be Calvin Ridley or Kyle Pitts that catches a deep ball on the sideline, but we're playing man coverage, and like I said, we're paying a lot of money between Logan Ryan, we have a lot invested in Xavier McKinney, we may be investing more in Jabril Peppers, but we have so much invested in Bradbury and Jackson that if they get beat on the sideline in man coverage, I'm not going to lose my mind over it. But this death by 1,000 cuts approach, where you're playing off in this cushion that you're playing with, it's killing this Giants defense right now. So, yards after the catch, the fact that the Giants defense allowed 144 total yards after the catch versus Washington, and you're seeing the spray chart on the screen, probably that's been up here for a while, you're seeing the spray chart that Taylor Heineke completed most of his passes less than 10 yards. Less than 10 yards. And it wasn't even they were utilizing the middle of the field. You know, they were utilizing a little bit outside the hashes too, but it's been relatively in the intermediate part of the field. Taylor Heineke wasn't slinging it deep down the field. That's not how the Giants got beat. That's not how they allowed all their 20-plus yard plays and all their 15-plus yard passing plays. They're getting beat with yards after the catch, and that's the thing that's killing them. So there you go. That's my overall ask for Patrick Graham, is to now, the critique last week was play more zone and get back to your roots. Well, now that I actually have the data, now that I actually know what's going on, let your corners play backyard ball. You're paying them a lot of money to do that. Let them play backyard ball. Got to change something, because this Giants defense is costing us kind of 2 games so far this year, and the offense in a way has kind of held up their end of the bargain. All right, so there you go. So that's a stats report. We will see you next week. God willing, it's when the Giants win and we can have a celebration. So I'll see you next week. Peace. Go Blue. See ya.